Hey guys, Lee here again with Tooth of the Arrow Broadheads. Today we are doing a complete breakdown of every product that we manufacture and sell. So we're going to go through all the broadheads, we're going to discuss our sharpener, and we're going to explain why you might pick one broadhead over another so that you can find the perfect option for your bow, or perfect options. Because as I'll explain later, there's a lot of guys like myself who will keep multiple heads in their quiver. So we'll get into all that right now. So first thing, there are basically two ways we break down our product lineup, and the first one is cut diameter. So we have this is the traditional, the original 1-inch broadhead. That is a cut diameter, and we would compare that to the XL, which is 1 3/16 cut diameter. So why might you choose one over the other? Well, the 1-inch is going to penetrate better. There's less material, so it's going to be less, it's going to cause less friction on the way through an animal. Simply, there's less material to make its way through the animal, so it'll get through easier. The drawback is that there is less cutting surface, so you will be doing slightly less damage. Now, a matter of 3/16 of an inch is not a big deal, and I am a firm believer, just through researching and speaking with the Ashby Foundation, among my own personal experience, that penetration beats everything when it comes to lethality. Penetration and accuracy, that is. So if I'm debating between the 1-inch and the 1 3/16, the first thing I'm going to ask myself is, what distance am I typically shooting? You know, if I'm hunting out of a tree stand for black bears or a whitetail blind, and I know my shot's going to be, 40 yards or closer, I know that the little bit of a bigger head is still going to get amazing penetration because you're so close. The arrow hasn't had a ton of time to slow down. So you won't have to worry about that loss of penetration with the slightly bigger blades. Now, I hunt mostly in Alberta, a lot of stuff in the mountains and the open country, where shots can be longer, so I want to have as much penetration as I can, even on those longer shots when my arrow has lost a bunch of its energy. So I like to shoot the 1-inch broadhead simply for that reason. Now, in theory, the 1-inch is also going to fly better than the XL. Again, less surface area, it's just less mass to be pushed around by wind, and because it's the same weight in a smaller mass, it's more compact, making it act more like a field point. So that's the discussion of XL versus 1-inch. Between the XL and the 1-inch, we make both of these broadheads also in a vented version. So what is the benefit and downside to that? Well, your solid series broadhead, no venting. It's going to be quieter. There's nothing for air to pass through in the blades while it's flying through the air. It's going to be quieter, and that can be super beneficial if you're hunting something that's known to jump the string, like whitetail deer are brutal for it, coos deer, which is a type of whitetail down in south and in Mexico. Pronghorn are pretty bad for it. If you're going hunting axis deer in Hawaii, they're notorious for string jumping. So having something quieter can seriously be beneficial. Now, I've never had an issue with noise coming from the vented broadheads. This was what we've had and been producing for years. We only introduced the solid series last year, and I never had an issue with these. But in theory, no venting is going to be quieter, and it will penetrate better too. Now, why might you shoot the vented? Well, it's going to fly better at long range. The fact that air can pass through the blades makes, again, the weight more compact towards the center of the broadhead, which makes it act more like a field point, and air passing through the blade makes it less prone to wind planing or getting pushed around by wind. That's really the discussion when it comes down to solid versus vented. So now, when you're deciding, do I want a solid or a vented, a 1-inch or an XL? How do you put all this information together? You really just got to look at your hunting scenario. Things like shooting a low poundage bow, that will impact your decision. You're probably going to want to go with the higher penetrating option, which would be the 1-inch, and the solid particularly would be our best penetrating option. If you have a wicked high power bow, you're not worried about penetration at all, and you know your arrow flight is great, you can't go wrong with shooting the big head. That's gonna fly great, and it's going to penetrate super well, regardless of that extra size. So there's just a lot of factors to break break down, and it's going to come down to you and your personal philosophy and your personal setup and situation, what you're hunting, where you're hunting, how fast your arrow flies, how confident you are as an archer taking long shots. All of these things are going to come into play. And of course, we're always happy to answer questions. If you aren't sure, you can't decide between two heads, feel free to ask us and we'll let you know. But I want to point out, you cannot go wrong with any head in this lineup. We design our broadheads so that they are the most field point like fixed blade broadhead on the market. That comes down to the way we machine them, and more importantly, the weight centeredness of our heads. As I talk about a lot, and if you've read any of my blogs before, that's so key to our design, is having that weight centered. So basically what that means is the more weight we can put towards the center of the arrow shaft, in line with the arrow shaft, you could say, the more it will act like a field point. And you can think about it like this. When you're shooting a field point, 100% of the weight of that point is in line with the arrow shaft, and that's why they fly so good. There simply is no weight outside of that arrow shaft's line to be steering or pulling the arrow in any which way. So if we make a broadhead that is engineered to be as close to that as possible, they fly really well, and that's what we have with our lineup of broadheads here. So like I said, you can't go wrong with any of them, and what I know a lot of guys, including myself, will do is they'll keep multiple heads in their quiver because, and here's a really key feature of our broadheads, they all fly the same. As long as your bow is reasonably well tuned, and we highly recommend paper tuning, they all fly the same. So I like to keep a 1-inch vented, and I like to keep an XL solid in my quiver at all times. If I'm hunting, let's say in northern Alberta, where you might have a wide open shot or you might have a shot that's literally 10 yards away, I like having that option. If I'm really close to an animal, I know that I'm not worried about losing speed. I just want to make the biggest hole possible, and I'm not worried about, you know, that pinpoint accuracy at a 10 or 20 yard shot. I'm gonna pull out the bigger broadhead, the bigger solid, because I want to do as much damage as possible. Now if I'm trying to take a shot that's 70 yards, it's a little windy, something that every little bit of accuracy means so much to, I'm gonna pull out that 1-inch vented because it's just such an accurate head. So it's so nice to have all these options available. And I'll keep other broadheads in my truck too. Honestly, I'll sometimes change my decision on which head I'm going to take into the field while I'm getting out of my truck. Sometimes it just comes down to a bit of a feel thing, but like I say, I have 100% confidence in any broadhead in this lineup. So in my opinion, it doesn't matter as much as some people might think which broadhead you choose. Pick one that you feel good about and that flies good out of your bow, and you can't go wrong. Now, obviously, I have a lot more packs of broadheads here than just the ones we discussed. That is because we make a whole bunch of different weights. So our lightest one is the 85 grain, and that's only available in a vented 1-inch. Our heaviest one is the 175 grain, and that is only available in the XL solid series. So I can't tell you which weight is best for you. There's a lot of factors that come into that decision, and I've actually made a full video series about how to build the perfect arrow and determine all of these things, so you can look that up on our channel. It's called How to Build the Perfect Arrow, Part 1 and Part 2. Part 1 is going to be the part for you if you're unsure about what weight you should use. The one key thing to mention when we're talking about different weights is that when we add extra weight to a broadhead, and I'll use 125 grain and 150 grain XLS series to demonstrate this point. These broadheads are the exact same cutting diameter. The profile is identical, and if you were to poke the broadhead through a piece of paper, the holes would look the same. So where does that extra weight go? The extra weight, that 25 grains, is added to the ferrule. The ferrule is the part of the broadhead that is in line with the arrow shaft, as we talked about before. That's the weight centeredness coming into play. So when we add that extra 25 grains to the ferrule of the broadhead, in theory, the broadhead becomes more like a field point and will be more accurate. So real world applicability to that, 25 grains added to the center, it will make it more like a field point, but at the same time, if your bow is well tuned, paper tuned, your spine is right, all of these broadheads are going to fly just like field points for you. I can promise you that. But like I say, in theory, having a heavier broadhead from our lineup will make it act more like a field point. So it's a consideration. And for that reason, this last year, I shot the 175 grain head because it has the highest concentration of weight in line with the arrow shaft in the ferrule. So that would be kind of my thought process in picking which head I'm going to shoot on a particular hunt or with my setup. And lastly, I'll mention, we also make a broadhead sharpener. This is super lightweight. It's a plastic casing with two flat stones that are angled and glued in at the perfect angle. So that it's entirely foolproof. They work with every head in our lineup. It's a great thing to just throw in your backpack. I keep one in my truck, one in my backpack. It's awesome to have. It can really prolong the life of your heads. You know, we've heard of a lot of guys who have been shooting the same head at multiple animals year after year because they just keep on sharpening them, and that's a really cool story to have as well. So I hope that helped break down a bit of our broadhead lineup for you guys. And like I say, if you have any questions about a particular head or your particular setup or hunting situation and what head might be best for you, let us know in the comments below or send us a message. We'd be happy to discuss it with you and answer any questions you might have. Thanks for watching.